All right, thank you for coming today. I'm Sean Brown. Just a reminder of names. This is Susan, Michael, and Taylor. We're here to talk to you about advisor marketing, as you heard. Before we get into it, a couple things. Everybody here, well, first of all, it looks like there's a lot of fans in the seats. So all of you who, thank you, Caleb, for a couple things. I'm going to go over a couple slides to get us started here, and then we're going to do a Q&A. The slides are all about a survey that YCharts did on those advised, and what they think about advisor communications, and then we're going to tee that up as a way to get into things. The presentation is available for everybody. It's available if I'm going to show a QR code and you can just grab it or come by the YCharts booth. Also, everybody here, you are entitled to a free rest of the month of September use of YCharts. Contact us. We're in booth, I think, 401. Come by, say hello, or check some of the postings at for the show. But let's get into it. I'm going to give a very, very brief summary of a survey we did as context here. That the thesis is advisors need to get a lot better at marketing. So we did a survey that contacted and got responses from almost 700 advised individuals. Bunch of different demographics, but let me give you the punchline so we can get into the Q&A. So here's what we heard. 1 in 5 advised individuals switched their advisor since 2020. 1 in 5. The other thing we heard is 1 in 4 considered switching their advisor. So if you add those two things up, almost half of advised individuals have at least had a serious thought about leaving their advisor over the last couple years. Very different from if anybody reads Michael Kitcey's stuff. Michael Kitcey's has said 95% of advised individuals renew on an annual basis. So we're talking up to 50% of people are at risk. 9 out of 10 of those individuals said their advisor's communication was a big factor in their decision to remain with an advisor and how content they were. We did this survey in 2019. A couple big differences between the 2019 survey and the 2020 survey. Number one, the consequences of poor communication were threefold. Number one is the individual was not going to have a lot of confidence in their financial plan. Number two is the individual was not going to be open to giving referrals. And number three is the individual would be at risk of looking at other advisors. So the other big thing that our survey told us was back in the past, when it was a raging bull market for 11 and a half years, you didn't need to focus so much on investment performance. You could focus on knowing their family, really focusing on their goals, focusing on holistic view of the individual. What we found in this most recent survey is if you're not talking about investment performance, you're not talking about what your clients want to be hearing about. So with that as context to what we're talking about, again, anybody who wants that survey, please feel free to take a picture of the QR code and it's yours. We want to break up our discussion into a 5-part act. Number one is there a problem? Number two is marketing for growth, bringing in new customers. Number three is marketing for retention. Number 4 is how do I get started? And number 5 is what are the big takeaways from this? So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my distinguished panelists and start with the question. I told you guys what we heard in a survey. I guess I'd start with you, Susan. Are advisors generally good communicators? Is there a problem?
I definitely think, am I on?
Yeah.
There we go. I would definitely agree with that, and I love that study that you guys have done. It's is it the second that you've done? Mm-hmm. I use the stats all the time because it really does reinforce that client communications in particular is one of the perhaps biggest driving forces of engagement, retention, referrals, and growth. And I think one of the things we were talking about before is, did things change after 2020 during COVID. And I think if you think back, how many Zooms did you do a week before COVID? I don't know about you. I don't think I did any. We did conference calls. I haven't done a conference call in 2 years. That COVID changed everything as it relates to people's adoption and comfort with technology. You think about the average grandmother and grandparents out there. If they wanted to see their kids and their grandkids, they had to get used to Zoom. They had to get used to FaceTime. They got information from Facebook, and they started to go online. And I think that really changed the relationship and communication vehicles that advisors need to use, and changed also the need for immediacy, for information all the time. And if they don't get it from the advisor, they're looking elsewhere.
It's a great question. I'm going to kind of amplify Susan's, and then I'm going to zag a little bit. Susan's right in the sense that the way that we communicated with our clients at Baird during COVID changed dramatically. I mean, we were doing Zooms all the time. I was doing essentially just quick market updates that we would deliver via electronic platforms. We were emailing less and just trying to get in front of them a little bit more. The zag here I'm going to say about advisors and their content kind of during COVID and post-COVID is that it changed in the sense that what clients didn't want was some highly technical market analysis, and what they really wanted was just to be reassured that they were going to be okay, right? And that's rooted a little bit in behavior, which I'm passionate about. So not only did the channel change, but the kind of content that really, really mattered during and post-COVID morphed into more of a talk me through like this difficult, challenging time. I don't want to hear about earnings estimates. I want to hear about how my money is safe and how we're going to get through this together. And so that alone, I think, really amplified good advisors, and it kind of bucketed the advisors who were being left behind. And I think that's still going today.
Well, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say the exact same thing. When I think about communication, I think about, or improving communication, doing more of it, right? More phone calls, more emails, more touches. And what we learned, especially post-COVID, is exactly what you just said, which is our clients just want to know that they're okay. They don't necessarily need more information. I think one important thing that every advisor should do is to survey your clients. And so we survey our clients at least once every other year. We did a survey at the end of last year, and we were able to learn from a subset of our clients that they want to hear from us more often, a handful of them, and they just want to know that they're okay. And so we literally record Loom videos to these clients that we've identified once a month, and I do these videos, and really the conclusion of the video is just like, you're okay, everything's on track, and we're watching over your plan. Mm-hmm. And so I just get trapped into thinking sometimes that like improving communication equals more communication. That's not necessarily the case.
In psychology, the fear of loss is twice as powerful as the pleasure of gain. And I think that's really what communications is all about. It's preventing their fear of loss and getting ahead of that. And when you're not communicating, especially during times of volatility, that's when fear creeps in, and that's why you're seeing the stats that you did with 50% of people potentially looking or moving.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you guys agree with there's a challenge out there. Before we move on to Act 2 of our thing, is there a consequence of this challenge? Because our survey said up to 50% of your clients may be at risk, but any advisor I've talked to has said, much like that survey many years ago, Lake Wobegon or whatever it was, that 90% of Americans said their child was above average intelligence. Most advisors I've talked to said, yeah, I believe that, but not my practice. I'm a great communicator. My clients aren't at risk. So I guess I'd ask, especially you, Taylor, you're an excellent communicator. Have you noticed anything different about your clients, or do you feel like they are at risk at this point?
Yeah, I don't think they're at risk, or I guess we're all at risk of like poorly communicating with our clients, and obviously the consequence is there's no relationship there. That relationship is terminated. For us, I mean, we want to have good, positive experiences with our clients. We want our clients to be happy with our services, and I think communication is a big part of that. So just knowing that we're meeting or exceeding their expectations is really important to us. One thing I was going to add to my earlier comments is, I think something important too is getting ahead of our communication so clients aren't sitting there wondering, when am I going to hear from Taylor next? When are we going to meet next? And so creating a really good, client service calendar and training your clients to understand when they are going to hear from you and when they're going to meet with you, so they're not sitting around wondering, when am I going to hear from them next? So being proactive in the relationship has been really important for us.
Okay. Well, let's close Act 1, which is the problem statement. Let's move now to marketing for new clients. So what does good prospect marketing look like?
I'll start. I don't think there's one recipe for success, but I think most importantly, it's about building your personal brand and dripping on prospects the same way you drip on clients, so that you're showcasing your expertise, you're sharing valuable information that would be of interest to them, which doesn't mean, all the, technical mumbo jumbo. It's about the types of challenges and goals that they're facing and the fears that they're facing, really. But they also want to know you as a human, so and that's where social comes in. So having, as well as email, just having a balance of content that is continuously dripping out, that is both showcasing your, altruism of sharing information freely, as well as showing your personality and, letting them really just have a door into your business and who you are.
I have so many spicy takes. I could dump them all out here. I'm glad we have at least 50 people that I can dump them into here. I'm gonna do 2, maybe 3 things. Number 1, when you think about prospecting, okay, let's delve into the behavioral side of prospecting, the psychology of prospecting. Prospects care about 3 things, right? This is on their minds. Why should I care? Why you? And what's in it for me? Okay, that's what they care about when you're prospecting to them. That's deep down in their psychological brains. I'm going to say this right now. If you go into a meeting with a prospect and you're bringing that gigantic chart that shows the growth of $1 over 100 years, we've all seen that one. I'm not sure they care, to be quite honest. Hey, I'm going to make you rich in 100 years isn't a great pitch. Saving the correct way, a financial plan is the right way. So when you're prospecting, I really, really want to focus on what's in it for them now. And again, long-term savings, investing, that's important. What's in it for them now? And I'm going to end on this, and I'll hand it to my friend. I'm going to give you guys the secret to prospecting. Are you ready? I'm glad you guys are here. Don't tell anybody else, all right? I'm going to give you the secret to good prospecting from my perspective. You ready? Here we go. Talk like a normal person. Talk like a normal person. It's an absolute finance superpower.
I think there's 2 parts. One is knowing who your ideal client is, and I think that's where a lot of advisors struggle, is who exactly am I, marketing to or targeting. So that's number 1, is knowing who you're going after. And then number 2, I like to think about my marketing in terms of, or calling it education-based marketing and educating my ideal client. Years ago, I started my career at Morgan Stanley, and we went on a ski trip every year. And one advisor at the firm that I was working with told the story about how he was on a chairlift with a guy, and a guy asked him about how he invests or stocks, and he said something like, "Open an account and you'll find out." And how I market is the complete opposite of that. I host a retirement podcast, and on the podcast, I literally share everything that we do for our clients in detail, exactly step by step how to process a Roth conversion if that's something that you want to do. And so we try to just educate and share as much as possible, knowing that people don't want to do this themselves. Of course, there is a subset of people that do, but most people don't. And so by sharing our expertise and educating our ideal client, in turn, a lot of these potential clients end up reaching out to us.
I just was talking to an advisor. We write content for advisors, and in September we wrote a blog and an email on the September effect, which actually was sort of new to me. That October is famous for all the market volatility and crashes, but it's actually September that has the worst market performance over time. So it was just this sort of interesting blog and email and a social post, and advisors of ours that were using it got tremendous feedback from their clients, but they also got responses. I had one advisor tell me he got a response from a prospect that he'd just been dripping on, and there wasn't any actionable, call to action in the piece. It was just informative and interesting, and the person said, I don't even pay attention to my accounts, and I've just been, I follow your emails and your social, and this was really interesting. I'd love to set up a meeting. So it's interesting. I think it's counterintuitive for most advisors that the soft approach and giving away information and making it doesn't have to even be about something technical or even a financial plan will be what actually converts them.
Yeah. So I'm going to do a speed round with each of you with 2 questions to close out this act. Question number 1 is, how often should you be contacting a prospect? And number two is there any gem of a marketing campaign or something you did that worked incredibly well for you that other people may borrow?
I think consistency is important. I think ideally having something that you can do on a regular basis once per week to reach out to your ideal client is probably best practice. But I think about creators out there, content creators out there like Dan Carlin, any hardcore history fans. How many podcast episodes per year does he publish? One per year. But when he releases an episode, his fans, race to go listen to it. So I think there is something to be said for, quality over quantity. You don't have to necessarily publish things once per week or once per month. I do think it's important, and it depends on your practice and your goals. Something that worked really well for me, as I built up my podcast audience, the biggest mistake I made was not telling them what I did, who I did it for, and how they could take action if they wanted to. And what I found out when I actually went to my audience and said, here's how I can help, and if you're interested, go and do this thing, I found out that a large percentage of them didn't even know I was a financial advisor, didn't even know I was taking on new clients or who I did my best work for. And so I tell advisors, I literally drew this in crayon on the podcast, said it out loud, and all of a sudden, people started to show up. So, we do have to, be clear about what we do and help people take action.
I'd say cadence is important when you're creating content, especially if you're marketing your business. But I don't think you want to put content out just for content's sake. I do like the kind of, I'm going to put out a podcast once a week, or I'm going to write a blog once a month. And that actually may need to be changed based on market conditions, right? During COVID, people wanted to hear from us more. Right now, there's really not that much going on in kind of late August, early September of this year. So if you're going to produce something, is it noise? It might be. So I think the cadence depends on what's happening in the world. The higher the VIX, the higher the clicks. That's definitely true. And in terms of kind of things that I've done that have had a major impact, there's still a bunch of space, my friends, in the short form content space. There's still a bunch of space there. Like Kyla Scanlon, who we all know, who does great content online, 1 to 2 minute videos explaining what the Fed's doing. There's a lot of space for a sub 10-minute content. Maybe it's 6 minutes in a video series. Maybe it's a 5-minute, this is what happened this week in the markets. So to me, I've had a lot of success with short form videos under 10 minutes. And I've had a ton of success, the most read blog that I've ever written, I had something like 20,000 hits on it, which is a lot for me. Typically I get 4,000 on my blogs, was just relating something that happened in my life to the markets. So when you create a powerful narrative that is not only interesting, but kind of brings forth who you are as a person, that's a secret sauce. That can really have a huge impact, much more so than, hey, the markets were down for XYZ reason. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would obviously agree with those. I think for advisors, sometimes a recipe is helpful since the average advisor is not, a marketing guru. So I like to say that although it really depends, it is great to put a schedule together and at least have goals. I think ideally, if you were just doing a blanket statement for what would be great, you want to have content across the medium. So let's say you try to aim for 2 blogs a month. You try to do 2 emails a month. You want to do 2 to 3 social posts a week. Just setting a goal and putting a calendar together and then sticking to it. Like anything in life, when you have a goal, it's sticking to it, and it's the consistency. I think that's really important, and adding, doing short form, the video is really key. And the secret sauce is when you get personal. And if you can relate your personal story in some way. I just did a post for our advisors on, it was like Golf Lovers Day or something, and I did a whole thing on an analogy between golf and financial planning, and weaved in a little bit about what a typical advisor would say, and that did way better than the post on the Secure Act blankety blank. So I think consistency, having a calendar, trying to stick to it, but the highest performance, I think we'll all say, is when you hit timely. So if something happens in the market, if something happens in the world, and you want to be the first person before they are wondering what's happening and nervous, you want to be the first person to give them that information before they look elsewhere.
Yeah, so summing that up, timely, personal, cadenced, and don't be afraid, as Taylor mentioned, to have a call to action, to say, here is what I would love for you to do. Follow up with me. I am a wealth advisor. There's nothing wrong with stating what your value proposition is. So we're going to close out that act and go to Act 3, which is marketing and communicating with your current customers. So my first question is, how is communicating with your current customers different than with prospects? Are there things you can use that are in common, or is it a whole different game?
Let me start here. I mentioned kind of the psychology of prospecting, which is kind of the what's in it for me, why you. That's certainly different than, like you're saying, than current customers. Current customers, they want to know that you have a handle on not only their money and their plan, but you have a handle on kind of where things are generally going. And you do have to display some level of expertise from time to time. I'm not always saying you need to just write stories about yourself and tell them about the best dinner you just had. You definitely need to display an expertise around planning and the technology that you use and the markets. Those are all important parts of being an advisor. But again, I keep falling back to this thing that I think Taylor and I agree on, which is, am I going to be okay? I do think that when you're internally communicating with your current client base, am I going to be okay is an overarching theme that you constantly have to be swimming around. And if that question is ever thrown into doubt, you'll know it. The client will be nervous. They'll be upset. So you do want your marketing to be around that as a broad topic, but you also want to be hitting on the things that maybe your firm is pushing. Maybe you have some new technology. Maybe you have some new initiatives. It's different in the sense that they want to know they're okay as opposed to what's in it for me. But you do want to be constantly thinking about reinforcing your value, like why you're there, what is it that you bring to the relationship. And especially in difficult times, that's when it's most important that we understand you and how we're going to get you through these difficult times.
Again, I think when we think about communication, we think about just like sending more emails, more phone calls. I'm going to run with this theme of being proactive, and it's similar to what you just said. When I think about our current clients, one of the things that we try to do really well is to constantly remind them what we're doing for them. So we use a tool called Text Expander to build email templates that we can send out to our clients on, emails that we send over and over again to all of our clients. They can be customized, but with a few clicks of a button, we can send the same email over and over again. And so simple things like the account was rebalanced. We have a rebalance email in Text Expander that goes out to that client. Dear client, your account was just rebalanced. Here's why. And so things like that throughout the year that we're doing behind the scenes that are often invisible to the clients, reminding them throughout the year that we are doing these things. So being proactive so they're not sitting there wondering, what's Taylor and his team doing for me? When was my account last rebalanced? When are we going to meet next? Which is another thing I mentioned, being proactive with meetings. We meet with our clients in the spring and in the fall, and we've trained clients to know that that's when we meet. Now, when we reach out to them, we don't just say, time to schedule a meeting, schedule it now. Hey, in 4 weeks from now, we're going to be sending out an email with a link to schedule your meeting. So again, being proactive in those communications. So setting proper expectations, being proactive are two things that I think we do differently with our existing clients than we would with maybe our prospective clients.
Yeah, and I would say, when I talk about a marketing calendar of content, I think that can be leveraged for both prospects and clients. That's sort of your foundational content strategy. So, for example, if I'm, writing content for our customers and I'm writing a blog and an email, that email I'm going to version, one for clients, one for prospects, and one for centers of influence. But it takes, 2 minutes to version it. So they're just slight tweaks that you can use on the same content, so it, comes across more personalized. Then layer for customers, obviously you have so much more information. So that's where segmentation comes in, so that you can get more, right message, right time, and also, even on the things that are non-financial, their interests. And then you want to layer on top of that the surprise and delight. I think, the most, I call it, creating referable moments. I think those are those moments when you reach out, whether it's, using compliant texting to, say happy birthday, or, oh, I know the Little League finals are coming up. Whatever it might be, those moments are, I think, what drives referrals and what drives the greatest engagement. So you've got your base content that can work for both. You want to layer on segmented content for your clients and then aim to surprise and delight.
I think that's a really important thing to highlight. Before we really niched down and got focused with the type of people we work with, we would send out these kind of generic emails to our clients via our email platform. We sent out an email about disability insurance, and one of our retired clients emailed me back saying, why did I get this email about disability insurance? Like, I'm retired, I don't need disability insurance. So if you are going to serve multiple demographics with multiple needs and pain points, segmenting those communications is really important.
Yeah, and the other thing I've heard from advisors a lot is on the topic of how often and what, they liken it to with their spouse. They've never gotten in trouble for saying "I love you" too many times. And hey, maybe you send an email again with content relevant to them. Maybe they don't open the email. However, they saw the email. They saw the subject line. It's there. You found a way today to say "I love you," and you may have repurposed that content from something else. Any expert tip, cheat code, tactics you guys would recommend to this group that you've used to stay in touch or tell your clients "I love you"?
I know FMG talks about this. I know Samantha, one of my good friends, talks about this. Zero-click content is a smart way to go about the current state of the world. So when you're creating something that goes out, give them the content in the bulk of the email. Give them the content in the LinkedIn post or in the Twitter post. To send somebody somewhere else, it's really tough to get that click-through rate. I use my Emma as like an email tracking program, and I look at my click rate for our blog, and it's tough to get a 40% click rate because you're making them open an email, then click, and then go to another blog. And I would say that it's to be on top of these trends of zero-click, to be on top of these trends of putting the video in the email or embedding your content right away. You can get your message out a little more efficiently. And then, a catchy headline. I mean, as trite as it sounds, I mean, you need to kind of look for that clickability, right? You need to have an interesting way to say what's going on, right? If my video series is all that matters, and I put out an email with our current video, I would say, this definitely matters. You got to click on this, right? You want to create that sort of impetus, and those things might seem cliche, but they actually legitimately do work.
So a lot of what we do and a lot of what we're talking about today is digital, right? Sending emails, sending videos. We talk about Zoom meetings and how many of those occur now. So one giant shift we've made recently is trying to be more physical in our client communications. In our new client onboarding workflow, 3 months after a new client joins us, we put together a very, very nice kind of welcome gift basket that is often catered to the client and what their likes are that we've learned through that onboarding process. And then second, something that we're launching next month is a physical newsletter that's going out to clients, very nicely designed and printed that only goes to existing clients. Again, like everything we do is digital. We meet with most of our clients via Zoom, emails, phone calls, and we wanted something that they could actually hold on to. And so that's something that we're making a shift in.
And Susan, your business is all about enabling advisors to be better marketers, oftentimes taking the work off of their hands. What kind of tips would you give people?
Well, I think we've talked a lot about content, and we're talking about consistency, and we're talking about a lot of different mediums and a lot of different activities. And I think for the average advisor, that feels like a lot of work, and it is a lot of work, and you don't have a whole staff of content writers. So finding a partner that you trust, that can help you with the content development, because at the core of what we're all talking about, it really is content and the strategic repurposing of content. So I'd suggest, looking for a partner that can help you with the content creation and the ease of distribution of that content so that you can do the things that you can only do. The segmentation, the surprise and delight, those are things that are in your space, the personal stories. But you also need that foundational content that on a consistent basis across all these different mediums. And for most people, that really is something you can outsource. So finding the right balance of in-source, outsource, help with content, and using technology to help you distribute.
Great. So let's move on to Act 4, which is, how do I get started? First question is it realistic for every advisor to be a social media superstar, a podcaster, a macroeconomist who puts out great thought pieces, and an expert in sending well-cultivated physical goods? Any advice on what people should aspire to become and how they should get started?
I think it's impossible to do everything all at once. And so I think it's really critical that you do choose one thing. And if it's not you, maybe it's somebody else in your firm, to do that one thing to educate your ideal client. It could be a podcast, it could be a YouTube channel, it could be a blog. I joke it could be, handwriting and snail mailing your marketing material to people. I don't think it really matters what it is. I think it has to be authentic to you, something that you enjoy and something that you're good at and can be consistent with over a period of time. So, if you try podcasting and you walk away with a headache and you hate it, like, you probably shouldn't, launch a podcast. I think people get trapped into thinking that just because YouTube is all the rage or podcasting is all the rage, like, that's what I have to do. But I think you can be wildly successful doing, any form of what I call education-based marketing. It doesn't have to be what the hot thing is.
This is a great question. I think about this a lot because all of us want to be taken seriously. All of us want a big kind of social media channel. We all want to feel like people love and read our content, but there's a lot of content out there, right? There's a ton of content out there. I think if I was going to hire you, I want to know who you are as a person. I want to know what your personality is. If I walk up to you and say, I'm debating using you as my money manager, I'm debating using you, I want to know what you think about the world, and whether that's done on LinkedIn or a blog or a video series. At least pick one channel and try to commit to showing the world who you are, because I'm not going to hire you until I Google you. And if I Google you and there's nothing out there, I'm more likely to go choose somebody else who is showing me who they are. And if podcasting's not for you or blogging's not for you, if you don't want to be a Twitter superstar, there's this little website called the Drudge Report, and Drudge's entire career was based on aggregating. He literally just aggregates. So if you don't want to be an original content producer, be an aggregator. What does that mean? Pick people who think like you, aggregate their content, and that will show the world who you are. This person thinks like me. I can't write like Morgan Housel, but I think like Morgan Housel. Like, I don't write like Mike Antonelli, but I love his Twitter account. Sorry, all right. So
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. So if you can't write, if you can't produce original content, be a curator. People love link fests. They love them. I've had some of my best success with link fests, because the link fests can show off kind of your view of the world, and you can put that somewhere, and it will drive people to you.
I would say marketing is an ascendant journey for advisors, and I'll be a little bit more tactical. I think the first and most important thing that absolutely is mandatory is a great website. That you are going to get Googled by any prospect, and they are going to check out your website, and if it's crap, the experience ends there. And obviously, we could have a whole session on best practices for websites. From there, I think I'd say client communications, prospect communications around content marketing, email at a bare minimum, and then social after that. Once you've got your website and you're getting some consistent email communications going out to both clients and prospects, start getting involved in social. Pick your channel based on where your ideal clients and where your clients are. And then you're really thinking about what you can add next, which could either be the podcast, or you're starting to video, or you're doing webinars. But you can be an expert at marketing in any one of those categories. It's just about mastering and being comfortable in each, and then adding what comes naturally to you. You will not be good at something that doesn't feel right. But I do think that sort of those two foundational, the website and email and having some social presence, has become like a baseline requirement.
I do think it's important to highlight that there's no shortcut here, that if you decide to be a curator, that it doesn't mean that it's easier or less time consuming. You mentioned short form video. Don't take that as like, oh, I can just do short videos, it'll be easier and simpler and I'll get more of them out there. So there is no shortcut to this, that if you are going to do something, it does take a lot of time, effort, and energy.
So that brings up the point, though, if I try something new, I feel like it's close to my DNA, I give it a try. How long should I stick with the tactic to know whether it's working? Should I expect after 2 X posts or Twitter posts that I'm going to get a following? What is your experience with how patient I need to be with results?
So I was an institutional trader before I joined Private Wealth, and I wrote a daily email that went out to institutional clients, and nobody read it. Right? You know how many daily emails go out to institutional clients? Like 800 million. And I just decided I was going to write something. I was like doing this very thing. I'm just going to write something and see if it works. And I would get no feedback for like 6 months to a year. Then I'm like, all right, I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to write about pop culture and the markets. And then you start to build a following. You start to get that feedback. The answer is longer than you think. And you may have to fail for longer than you think. And you may have to say, nobody's reading this. This is a disaster. But ultimately, I don't know who said this, when you're producing content, video, written, whatever, you need to just be writing for yourself. You need, do I want to read this thing that I'm writing? And if that's the case, just keep at it. Just keep at it. You can't quit after a month. You can't quit after 6 months. You're just trying to build buzz, and if you need to tack in a different direction, that's okay. I mean, I think that's completely fine. As long as you're being true to who you are and your personality and the kind of stuff that you want to read, stick with it. I mean, just stick with it.
It often takes about 3 years for these things to actually work, and there's research to support that. It takes about 3 years for your marketing efforts to work. I think in those 3 years, you can test a lot of things to ensure that you're on the right track. It's not start a podcast and wait 3 years. There are things that you can do, every month, every 6 months to test if what you're doing continues to make sense. I think one of the most important things is what I said earlier, is paying attention to your energy. Like, is this something that you enjoy doing? Don't force yourself to do it if you don't. So little things like, as you build up an audience of readers or podcast listeners, testing that call to action to see how many people respond. And I also think like measuring the growth of these things is important as well. How many new subscribers are you getting per month? So measuring things to make sure they're moving in the right direction, and then making improvements and iterations along the way. So hiring consultants or going to conferences or learning from your peers on how to improve and iterate on what you're doing. But it typically does take about 3 years to start to see actual success from these marketing efforts.
I love this question because all day long I hear from advisors that say, I just launched our website and nobody's called. Or, and I've been using this program, I've been sending out your content for 2 months and I don't have a new prospect. And, I'm like, it doesn't work like that. There's really nothing that's worthwhile in life that has an easy button, whether it's trying to get in shape or losing weight or learning a new sport. It takes time. And then if you fall off the wagon, it reverses. So I think of your marketing as there's short-term activity metrics, which are super important. So you should be looking at email open rates. You should be looking at impressions. You should be looking at, engagement. And that should tell you in the short term the type of content that's working. But what's most important is outcome metrics, which of course is what you all want to. But the outcome metrics, I like to measure year over year revenue or AUM growth. And if you've been putting in consistent, you really, check yourself, and you've been consistent in an approach for a year, I believe you will have results. We did, when I was at Advisor Group, we used FMG, private labeled it, and our advisors used it, and we did a year-over-year growth analysis of advisors who were actively engaged using the platform, and we had metrics around, they had a good website, they had email, they had social, they had blogs, and those that did not. And the growth rates, we did it by segment of AUM, so obviously the top tier would be the lowest percentage, but it was like 35%. And in that middle tier, it was like 3 times the growth. So it does pay off, and I think you just have 2 categories. You have activity metrics, and that's to fine-tune your process over time, and then you have outcome, which tells you you're on the right track.
Yeah. Let me just wrap really quick. I mean, ultimately, you're trying to create fans of yourself, right? You're trying to create fans of who you are. You're trying to create fans of how you believe in the world. You're trying to create people who buy into your business. And remember, before she sang in stadiums, Taylor Swift sang in bars, right? And it took her a while. It took her a while to get to to Soldier Field. So stick with it, right? Just because you're not getting immediate feedback, stick with it, because it takes a while to show the world who you are.
I saw a neat YouTube channel of just a beautiful late 80s gentleman whose wife had died many years ago, and he started recording videos of him singing. Just very happy songs. And he had like 13 followers for 7 years, and then the internet found him. And now he's got millions and millions of followers. So he was true to himself. He kept a cadence. He was doing it because it was stuff he would want to do, and eventually it paid off for him.
That's a great story.
Yeah. So let's conclude this act with a quick question. So Susan, you've told us how your firm and the tools you guys have can help advisors. I guess my question would be for Taylor and Michael. Are there any tools you might suggest people use or that you leverage that help you be a better communicator and marketer?
Well, we use a lot of tools, but I think one thing that's important to acknowledge is that these tools are not shortcuts. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made was throwing money at things, hiring different, outsourced experts or consultants, or buying a piece of technology thinking it's going to solve all my problems. And so when we're adopting these tools or implementing these tools, being really heavily involved. And one example I often give is our website, that we didn't just pay a website developer, designer to go build us a nice website. I was involved going back and forth with the designers and developers for almost 12 months to build out the entire thing. So I think, before you race to go adopt and implement, these, sometimes shiny objects, to make sure that you're going to be involved in that process, that you can't just outsource and delegate and expect things to work in your favor.
So on behalf of our advisors, Baird has about 1,200 advisors. On behalf of our advisors, I try to create content that they can use down their channel, right? So whether it's a blog or a video series or a podcast, Baird has partnered with FMG, and it's been a powerful tool for advisors, because what I've learned about advisors, and every advisor has their kind of own workflow. Every advisor has their own kind of process. The more you can kind of automate it for the advisor, the better it is for them, and the more willing they are to accept it. So when I write a blog, it gets uploaded, and it just goes out through FMG to our advisors and their clients, hits LinkedIn, hits socials. So any way to kind of automate your process, I think, is supremely welcomed by our advisors. They're busy people, obviously. When I create content, I have kind of a couple overriding or kind of overarching strategies. One of them is simplicity. If I'm going to engage with the average wealth management client, I don't want my message to be complex. If I'm going to use images, I want them to be simple and understandable, like infographics or listicles. And Sean, white charts is great. I love it. I use it every day. It produces things that people can understand. I mean, there are certainly a million different charting software solutions out there. They're complicated. They can look really strange. It's just nice to be like, this is what $1,000 grew into in this portfolio. This is what it looked like when it was selling off. And it's a simple image. I think that if you're going to use these tools to try to convey a message, whether it's investing or markets, you can't overcomplicate it. You want to automate it. You can't overcomplicate it. And then, you know what? In terms of internally, just picking up the phone also still works nowadays, my friends. The phone does still work. Everything does not have to be on social media, even though I want it to be. It's great to call up a client on the phone. It's great to call up an advisor on the phone and be like, did you see this? Because more than likely they did not. So I guess we need to still use the phone.
And just to add, so we have this program called Do It For Me, because in my years and years and years, and I'm definitely the old person in this group, but advisors would come to these sessions and hear us talk, and at the end they would just say, you know what would be really great is if you could just do that for me. And there is no way to really do it for you to have the success as great as it could be as if you did it yourself. So our Do It For Me program, every month I sit down to try to think about the content that would be best for the average advisor, but I also try to think about niches and do some optional content. So we partnered with Y Charts. I take their content and I'll write I'll write 2 blogs, 2 emails, 2 social posts, and sometimes more if something happens in the market. We partner, they send something over and I'm writing it. And then I'll do some that are more lifestyle, then I'll do some that are, like this month it was on, the biggest mistakes you make in divorce. But what I encourage is for advisors to take that as 80%. I mean, when I go to write something, it would be really, really nice if somebody just dropped it on my desk and I'm editing it. That's what I think advisors should think about when they hire somebody, is you're not hiring them to do it all, although you can. But if you take 5 minutes just to customize, put something in your voice, then you've really created scale. And when you leverage visuals like Y charts, those work much better than like using a stock photo.
I mean, just imagine if a prospective client or existing client said, here's all my money, you do it for me, right? I don't want to be involved in the process. Like, that would never work. So we have to be involved in that process, even if we hire an expert to help.
Yep. So thank you, and thank you for the quick plug. By the way, if anybody wants to learn about Y Charts, our content, or our new proposal functionality or the tiers, please come by and talk to us.
It's great.
But I do want to try to work together to very quickly sum up what we would ask people to take away. So maybe we'll each throw out a couple words. I heard be personal, be multi-channel and cadence, and be patient in results. You want to add anything to that?
That's a good sum up. I mean, I think remember that the fear of loss is far greater than the pleasure of gain. And when you're thinking about your content, it is about providing peace of mind, educating, giving away what you do for free, and showing who you are.
Let me make a plea to each and every one of you, and thank you, obviously, Sean and everybody for coming. Let me make a plea to each and every one of you. This industry is moving towards a more human-centric advisor. Okay, it's moving away from the kind of just goals-based. Here's a list of what you're going to do. It's moving towards a more human-centric advisor. Listen, people hear numbers, but they listen to stories. They hear numbers, but they listen to stories. Just try to become a better storyteller, whether you're using images or whether you're just talking about kind of people's concerns. If we do that, this industry will advance in so many unique ways. There's so many people doing cool things in this space. My friend Brian Portnoy is Shaping Wealth. They're doing cool stuff in this space. There's so many people out there that are helping advisors move towards that human-centric, and I hope all of us are also part of that. And I know Taylor probably agrees with me, but just try to be a little more of a storyteller, I guess.
That's well said.
All right. There's one question that popped up that I want to make sure we at least touch on, and it just popped up, which is ChatGPT. How can that help there? And I don't want to take more than 30 seconds on this question, but who has an opinion on that one?
I used it a lot. I think it's getting worse. Now I like Claude AI. I sometimes use Bard. I think it's great for idea generation, possibly a first draft, not a last draft.
Yeah, it writes like a 7th grader. It writes like you're in middle school and you just read, Lord of the Flies. I don't know. I've used it to say, hey, write 100 words about the markets in Shakespearean, and tried to use that for inspiration, but you can't. It writes like a 7th grader.
I think it comes up with great ideas, though. Like, I'll use it for subject lines, I'll use it for titles. I don't always use it, but like 80% of the time, it's giving me something better than a scratch, white piece of paper.
Yeah. All right, how about this other question? How can a solo advisor in a big setting like a large RIA or BD try to differentiate him or herself and communicate authentically when compliance is so limiting?
Well, unless you're talking about how the market is going to go up by X% and guaranteeing it, compliance doesn't get involved. Compliance doesn't care if you tell a great story about how how you worked with a client. In fact, testimonials are now approved by most compliance departments. Testimonials is a huge opportunity and another whole workshop. But compliance is limiting. I will say technology that helps your pieces flow through compliance so that they can go out right away is always good. That's something we do. But don't be afraid of compliance. I think it's an excuse in some respects. Compliance is going to say no to the stuff that we all know we shouldn't say. They're fine with the stuff that we're talking about.
Let me just chop in. I mean, Baird's a mid-size kind of investment management firm. So I have to deal with compliance all the time. Our advisors do too. A, find a place like Baird where they'll let you be creative and do all sorts of interesting things. But B, if you lean into storytelling, you're going to get storytelling through compliance. I promise you, right? As long as you're not saying, I guarantee you're going to be up X amount. But being a good storyteller will get through compliance. I promise you. So I would kind of focus on that. And if not, again, find a place where you can.
I think there's some amazing vendors, FMG Suite, Snappy, Y-Charts, Wealth Tender, that have created, compliant-friendly platforms. They've worked with these large compliance departments to ensure there's a way to deliver this material, in a compliant-friendly way. So, to your point, don't use that as an excuse. I think there are avenues to differentiate yourself. And then also, again, we get stuck talking about everything in the digital space. You can go to in-person conferences. You can go to different networking groups where your ideal client lives. Yep. You don't have to hide behind your computer screen.
Yep. Well, let me wrap this up. I want to take a moment. It's 9/11. And I just wanted to recognize that 22 years ago, 3,000 Americans lost their life. And I would just say, let's take that as a personal challenge. Let's go enjoy our day today. Sun or no sun, I'm thrilled to be here, and I know you all are. Thank you to our panelists. Hope you learned a little bit about advisor marketing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks.